I have spent a lot of time in various institutions of higher learning. Now, if our Creator had been a college student, he wouldn't have created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh. He would have waited before the night before it was due and pulled an all-nighter. This is a very special season of the year. The title of this talk is Saints in Love, and it's spring. You know, it's the season of romance, and that's true also in the biblical sense. This is the time when God wooed his people and married his people with a covenant. And then later on, we have the coming of the new covenant on Pentecost. This is the season where we are counting towards Pentecost. We begin in the days of unleavened bread, at the time that the first fruits of the barley harvest were offered, the wave sheaf. And then we continue on to Pentecost, when the wave sheaf pictured the risen Christ. Then we go on to Pentecost, and Pentecost, oh, here we go. Okay, in Pentecost we have the first fruits of the wheat harvest, picturing the risen saints. And at this time of year, in many countries in the world, including my beloved country, the United States, we have, as I'm speaking, we have Mother's Day. This is the Sabbath. Tomorrow will be the first day of the week. And in this particular year, 2020, tomorrow is Mother's Day. So to all of you mothers out there, happy Mother's Day. Now, when we think about mothers, we also think about the spiritual analogy, our Father God and our Mother the Church. And we think about marriage. We think about weddings. We think about Jesus Christ as the bridegroom and the church as the bride. And that's why I wanted to talk today about saints in love. We collectively as the church are the bride of Christ. We have to be preparing for the second coming of Christ that you heard Daniel reading about earlier. We have to prepare for the consummation of the marriage. In Ephesians, the 5th chapter, we see that a lot of instructions are given, very critically important instructions are given about marriage. Before any of you if you're about to marry, you should study Ephesians 5 as preparation for your marriage, for your wedding. And he says this in Ephesians 5, verse 32. This is a great mystery. He's talking about the relationship of husband and wife. But I speak concerning Christ and the church. So that's the ultimate purpose for marriage, is that it is a type of the relationship of Christ and the church. And then he goes on to summarize what he had taught earlier. Nevertheless, even if you don't quite get the spiritual lesson, but still try to have a successful marriage. Nevertheless, that each one of you in particular so love his own wife as himself, and let the wife see that she respects her husband. I wanted to talk today about two what I would call biblical romances. And one is speculative, okay? I'm admitting it. It's speculative. And the other, though, is confirmed. It's directly confirmed in the scriptures. And both of these are what you might call May and December romances, where the husband is quite a bit older than the wife. But that often happens in history. So let's first talk about Moses. The book of Acts, Stephen mentions Moses in this way. And Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians and was mighty in words and deeds. Well, we don't have in the Bible specifically what type of words and deeds he was doing, but there was a historian who wrote about the same time as the book of Revelation was being composed by the Apostle John. We have the Jewish historian Josephus, and he talks about the career of Moses as a great general. So now we have the speculative relationship, and Josephus wrote about this in his history. So we have the fact that Moses was a general, and he went down into Ethiopia from Egypt, and he conquered a city. And the way he did it was that a princess, an Ethiopian princess, saw him leading his troops, fell in love with him, and offered and wanted to marry him. And he said, "Will you surrender the city, and we can be married?" So he's obviously saved a lot of lives, a lot of suffering by agreeing to that. So the city was surrendered, and he married the Ethiopian princess. And I would imagine that he was about 38 and she was about 16, let's say. And so he goes back to Egypt. And here you see in the movie The Ten Commandments, this princess who Josephus calls Tharbis, this princess Tharbis was played by Esther Brown from UCLA. And Cecil B. DeMille only hinted at the relationship. He couldn't be too obvious in 1956. Besides, he was trying to set up a relationship with what was her name, Ann Baxter, the actress there. So he had to, kind of downplay the other story. Now, if this movie had been made more recently, instead of Esther Brown, I would have cast Yityish Ainau, who was Miss Israel in 2013. I would have had her play the Ethiopian princess if I had done the movie more recently. So he's 38, he goes back to Egypt, and when he's 40, he has to flee. So they're never able to get back together again. He has to flee the scene. And all the events that happens afterwards. 40 years later, he comes back, and so forth. He leads the people out of Egypt when he's 80 years old. So now we go 43 years later. He's 81. He's in the wilderness. Very likely Zipporah, his wife, has by now died. We don't read about her, I think, pretty much after the 19th chapter of Exodus or so. So she's very likely not even alive anymore. And so he's there in the wilderness. And if you look at a map, you can see how you can go from Ethiopia to the Sinai Peninsula. On a map, you can see how it can be done. You can sail up the Red Sea there, and you can go to the Sinai Peninsula, and then you can take a caravan to wherever Moses would have been at the time. And so this princess returns to him. Now she's 59 and he's 81. It's reasonable. And so she returns to him. Now, if I were going to do the movie about it, then who would play the princess when she comes back? Well, I would say Nichelle Nichols would be a good choice. And here you see that she's learned the Aaronic benediction, which now has become the Vulcan, live long and prosper. So anyway, but I'm not making a movie. I'm not a movie maker, but that would be an interesting speculation. Now, Aaron and Miriam were very upset when this Ethiopian woman showed up. Here you see a scene from the Ten Commandments where an Egyptian princess is going to be sitting at their table on the night which has become the night to be much observed. The night of the eating of the Passover lamb. And Aaron and Miriam confront Moses. She's an idol worshiper. She worships the gods of Egypt. And so she says, no. He says, let this princess sit at the table. And so we have a similar situation in Numbers 12. Moses and Moses' brother and sister are upset at his marriage to this Ethiopian princess. Then Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Ethiopian woman whom he had married, for he had married an Ethiopian woman. Also, there may have been, frankly, racial prejudice involved, too, when you study the account. So they objected to her maybe on two grounds, her paganism, and perhaps even a certain amount of racial prejudice. But maybe she accepted the covenant when she came back to Sinai. Perhaps she became a part of the people of Israel, as other Gentile women have done in the Bible. In any case, it seems to me that the marriage of Moses and the Ethiopian is symbolic of how God will ultimately merge, Jew and Gentile together under the new covenant, that he'll bring, that he'll graft Gentiles into Israel as a spiritual Israel. It's I would think, a type of that. Now, this is speculative, but now let's go to something that is confirmed in the Bible. This is now confirmed in the Bible. Here you have another May-December relationship and another Israelite-Gentile relationship. We have a Jew-Gentile relationship here because we have the people of Moab who had a very bad record historically, and perhaps you'll see on a map in a moment, we have here we see ancient Israel, and we see the Moabites, and we see the Jews. So they were neighbors, but not on the best of terms, but they were neighbors. And as you know the story, some Jews had gone to Moab, and had married Moabite women. But Ruth accepted, it's very clear, she accepted upon herself the Sinaitic covenant. She wanted to become a part of the people of Israel. And she wanted to definitely be a part of the family of her former mother-in-law, Naomi. We can read what she says in those classic words in Ruth 1 and verse 16. But Ruth said, "Entreat me not to leave you or to turn back from following after you. For wherever you go, I will go, and wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God." And she even goes on to say, "Will you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts you and me." So she had made that commitment to Naomi and to the religion, to the way of life of Naomi, to the teachings, the belief system, the beliefs and practices of Naomi. And so she does come back with Naomi to Judah. And now we have Boaz. And Boaz was a devout man, and he was a Torah observant man. Now, if you study about Pentecost, keep reading. Right after you read about Pentecost, you read about a very interesting principle in the Bible. Leviticus 23:22. "When you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not wholly reap the corners of your field when you reap, nor shall you gather any gleaning from your harvest. You shall leave them for the poor and the stranger. I am the Lord your God." And then if you go back to Leviticus 19, where we are told to love our neighbor as ourselves, before you come to that verse, you come to this. Leviticus 19:9-10. "When you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not wholly reap the corners of your field, nor shall you gather the gleanings of your harvest. And you shall not glean your vineyard, nor shall you gather every grape of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the poor and the stranger. I am the Lord your God." So we are to share with those who are less fortunate. And Boaz obeyed, and because he obeyed, he was blessed. That's how he found Ruth, because she was gleaning in the fields of his harvest, as he obeyed the instructions of the book of Leviticus. And Boaz, you see in a moment, was a devout man, and the people who worked for him were devout. And that's shown in just a couple of verses, how they greet one another. Now Boaz came from Bethlehem and said to the reapers, "The Lord be with you." And they answered, "The Lord bless you." So these are obviously Jews who took their heritage seriously. Now Boaz was a very wonderful man, but he did have one problem. He was ruthless. But that's about to be solved. So he sees Ruth, and he notices that this Moabite woman was so noble. You know, he heard all about her, and she was a good bit younger, so I guess he didn't want to, he was afraid maybe to make advances to her because he was a good bit older. But, he would have liked to have had a relationship with her, and evidently, and it turned out that she more or less pushed him into it. And so he said to her in the third chapter, we'll go into what he said to Ruth. Then he said, "Blessed are you of the Lord, my daughter." He calls her that because evidently he was a good bit older. "For you have shown more kindness at the end than at the beginning, and that you did not go after young men, whether rich or poor." She was, even though she was a widow, but she was still relatively young, and yet she did the right thing, and she did the right thing by her family, the obligation to her ex-husband, to her mother-in-law. And also she found a righteous man, even though he might not have been a young man, but he was a righteous man. "And now, my daughter," he says, "do not fear, for I will do all that you request. For all the people of my town know that you are a virtuous woman. You're an Eshet Chayil, a woman of valor." And later on, Solomon writes about the Eshet Chayil, the woman of valor, in Proverbs 31. So now we have this marriage of Ruth and Boaz. And again, this is typical. Boaz was an ancestor of Jesus Christ. Of course, now Ruth becomes as well. So again, we have the merger of the Sinaitic covenant and then with the Gentiles. So we have Jesus Christ as Boaz as Christ and Ruth as the church, and the church being not only Israelite but also in this case Gentile. Now here we go to Matthew 1 in verse 5. And we see in the legal genealogy of his legal father Joseph, we have Ruth and Boaz. Salmon begot Boaz by Rahab. Again, here we have Salmon of the tribe of Judah, and he begat Boaz by Rahab. Again, a Gentile woman who became a Canaanite woman, evidently a harlot in her younger days. And yet she becomes a part of the people of Israel and becomes an ancestor of Jesus Christ. This is legally, but later on we'll see she also was an ancestor of Mary. So Solomon begot Boaz by Rahab. Boaz begot Obed by Ruth. And Obed begot Jesse. And then we go, of course, Jesse begets David. So Ruth was David's great-grandmother. So now I want to go to Luke, the genealogy in Luke, the 3rd chapter.
Oops, sorry.
And the son of Jesse, okay, we know that David was the son of Jesse, who was the son of Obed, who was the son of Boaz, the son of Salmon. Now, this is clear. Nothing fishy about this. The son of Salmon. That went over some people's heads, I guess.
I got it.
Okay, oh, good. All right. The son of Nachshon. So here again we see that in the genealogy of Mary, we see Boaz there. So this is the story of Ruth is special from many different ways. But it does, as I said, it gives a history of the Davidic line. The covenant was made ultimately with David, that the Messiah would have to come from David. The Christ would have to be humanly a descendant of David. Now, if we go further, I wanted to talk about the relationship of, let's say, Moses and the Ethiopian, Salmon and Rahab, Boaz and Ruth, to show that under the new covenant, the church is universal. The church is worldwide. The church is all ethnicities, all come together under the new covenant. And Jesus Christ unites Israelite and Gentile under the new covenant, as we see in the book of Ephesians, written to a Gentile congregation. For through him, Paul says, we both, Israelite and Gentile, for through him we both have access by one Spirit to the Father. And these marriages that I've talked about today, saints in love, they remind us. Well, it's actually Revelations 19:7.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. This is something we can think about at this season of the year, this spring season. We can think about that when we read about the story. For example, when we read Song of Solomon during the days of unleavened bread, when we read the book of Ruth around Pentecost, we can think about Revelation 19. Let us be glad and rejoice and give him glory, for the marriage of the Lamb has come, and his wife has made herself ready. This is our challenge now. We as the church, Pentecost in effect is the birthday of the New Covenant Church. We as the church are the bride of Christ, and our challenge is to make ourselves ready. And that is why I decided to talk today about this subject. Saints in love.
All right, so coming up on the calendar here, we have when manna began to fall, when the Romans raised Jerusalem wall. That was what we just read about in Luke, so it's kind of interesting that ties in. And the children of Israel departed Mount Sinai. Scripture of the week is Matthew 7:24. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rains came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall. All right, we're going to be getting into a song in just a moment, but we are counting towards Pentecost. So we are now at day number 28. So let us go back through the numbers and we'll see how well we do. It gets a little tricky in here because some of these numbers do not come up very often and you have to get a little bit fancy. So for 22, what I have is some scholars have pointed out that there are 22 specific things mentioned in the creation account that God creates. 23, rather obscure but mentionable character is Tola, the judge of Israel, who served for 23 years. That's about all we know about him, so obviously that has significance for a reason. 24, there's 24 elders in Revelation. 25 was the minimum age to serve in the temple. 26 doesn't appear explicitly in the Bible. However, it is the gematria value of the Tetragrammaton. 27, we have Zimri in the 27th year of King Asa murdering King Elah. So yeah, I know if you get any of these right, you can give yourself a big pat on the back. 28. There were a set of curtains that God commanded be made for his wilderness tabernacle, and each curtain in this set had to be 28 cubits long. So it just goes to show you, though, how many numbers are found throughout the Bible when you can kind of go through these numbers and see, you know, matches for just about every one of them that's explicitly mentioned. If not, you can infer in the text. Yes?
Could I add Psalm 136, which is called the Great Hallel? There's 26 verses for the generations from Adam through Moses. 26 generations from Adam through Moses.
Okay. So that's a more explicit mention of 26. So that's good. All right. Well, anyway, we are counting towards Pentecost, so you can count along with us. So again, we're at day 28, and we, of course, will have activities online for you to watch, because we don't know in what areas you may be able to physically attend with people, depending on the conditions of the area. So at least you can join us virtually, and you can enjoy the celebration of Pentecost.
Hear it just cause, oh my Lord, and give to your man his right reward, oh Lord. Hear it just cause, oh Lord. Turn your face and fix your eyes. See my lips, they're free of lies, oh Lord. Hear it just cause, oh Lord. Try my heart and find that it's right. Watch my life both day and night. From first to last, my feet hold fast to your ways. Seek me, save me, show me your love. Spread your wings around me, Lord, from above, oh Lord. Hear it just cause, oh Lord. My enemy has closed his heart. He's gonna knock me down, gonna tear me apart, oh Lord. Hear it just cause, oh Lord. Hear it just cause, oh my Lord. Deliver my soul, unleash your sword, oh Lord. Hear it just cause, oh Lord. I'm looking to you in the time of my need. Answer me, Lord, you listen to me. The wicked lurks like a lion deep in his hiding place. Seek me, save me, don't let me die. Keep me as the apple, Lord, of your eye, oh Lord. Hear it just cause, oh Lord. Bowing down to the golden cows, men are trying to have the best life now, oh Lord. Hear it just cause, oh Lord. But as for me, I have not slipped. You've been holding me fast by the word of your lips, oh Lord. Hear it just cause, oh Lord. Try my heart, find that it's right. Watch my life both day and night. From first to last, my feet hold fast to your ways. Seek me, save me, show me your face. I'll be happy in you when I awake, oh Lord. Hear it just cause, oh Lord. I'm looking to you in the time of my need. Answer me, Lord, you listen to me. The wicked looks like a lion deep in his hiding place. Seek me, save me, show me your love. Spread your wings around me, Lord, from above, oh Lord. Hear it just cause, oh Lord. I'm looking to you in the time of my need. Answer me, Lord, you listen to me. The wicked looks like a lion deep in his hiding place. Seek me, save me, don't let me die. Keep me as the apple, Lord, of your eye, oh Lord. Hear it just cause, oh Lord. Oh Lord, hear it just cause, oh Lord. Oh Lord, hear it just cause, oh Lord.
Well, thank you very much for joining us again this Sabbath. You'll notice we've kind of changed our setup around, and I think we may have had a little bit of glitchiness this week, so we are going to keep working on that. But hopefully you're appreciating the improvements that we're making as well, and we will make it through, and we'll try to deal with our technical difficulties the best we can. In the meantime, if you'd like to get involved in the services in any way, we're happy to accept any submissions. If you'd like to read the scripture of the week or do a prayer, or even if there's something on your mind that perhaps you'd like to include as some sort of message, we're happy to look it over and see if it would be worthy of inclusion. Just send us a message through our Facebook page or through our YouTube channel, and we will see you in the future.